Have you ever heard the theory that the Philippines could be the actual Tarshish mentioned in the Bible? It's a bold claim, especially when most scholars place Tarshish in the Mediterranean, often pointing to southern Spain, historical Tartessos, as the prime candidate. Yet, a growing number of researchers and faith-based groups argue that biblical descriptions of distant islands rich in gold, silver, and maritime trade could just as easily fit the Philippines, given its abundant resources, strategic location along ancient trade routes, and archipelagic nature. This idea sparks passionate debate among historians, theologians, and Filipinos themselves. On one hand, it challenges established academic consensus and raises eyebrows for potentially mixing myth and historical revisionism. On the other, it inspires national pride and re-examines lesser-known maritime connections that might have linked the Middle East to Southeast Asia. As we explore this possibility together, let's stay curious, weigh the evidence fairly, and keep an open mind about the intriguing notion that the Philippines might be the long-lost Tarshish of the Old Testament. When we talk about Tarshish in the Old Testament, we're referring to a place known for its wealth, notably in gold and silver, as well as for its ships that journeyed across vast seas. The Bible mentions Tarshish several times, as a trading partner during King Solomon's reign, as a distant land connected to maritime expeditions, and even as part of the story of Jonah. Scholars have traditionally placed Tarshish in the western Mediterranean, with many pointing to Tartessos in southern Spain. However, this identification is not without debate. The ancient world was far more interconnected than we might suspect, with extensive trade routes crisscrossing the Mediterranean, Indian Ocean, and possibly reaching Southeast Asia. Historical records and archaeological finds hint that Phoenician sailors, famous for their navigational prowess, ventured well beyond their homeland in search of precious metals and exotic goods. Simultaneously, the Philippines' position along what is sometimes called the Maritime Silk Road suggests that it, too, was a hub of cross-cultural exchange. Throw in local legends, tales of abundant gold deposits, and the archipelago's rich marine resources, and you have a recipe for a compelling alternative theory that Tarshish wasn't near Spain at all, but much farther east in the island clusters of Southeast Asia. Whether you find this idea convincing or speculative, it underscores how overlapping trade networks, evolving place names, and ambiguous biblical references can leave the door wide open for reinterpretation. And that's precisely what makes the question of the Philippines possibly being Tarshish so intriguing to explore. One reason the Philippines draws attention in this debate is its long-standing reputation for substantial gold deposits. During the era of Spanish colonization, chroniclers noted the remarkable amount of gold worn by local chieftains, sometimes leading historians to speculate that these vast resources might explain why the archipelago came under such heavy international influence. Proponents of the Tarshish theory suggest that these abundant riches match biblical descriptions of a far-flung land supplying King Solomon with gold, silver, and other treasures. Moreover, they point to the Philippines' archipelagic geography and established seafaring cultures, communities known for navigating thousands of islands across extensive trade routes. Could these skilled mariners have operated the so-called ships of Tarshish mentioned in the Bible? Advocates say yes, noting potential parallels between ancient Southeast Asian maritime networks and the kind of far-ranging voyages described in biblical texts. Additionally, Some argue that references to Ophir, another mysterious biblical region often lumped together with Tarshish, might align with early Spanish and local records that loosely link the Philippines to Ophir's legendary gold. Although critics are quick to counter that conflating Tarshish and Ophir complicates the matter, believers in the Philippine connection see it as further validation of a Southeast Asian Tarshish. Ultimately, the idea stands or falls on whether one finds these parallels persuasive. Are they legitimate connections or just coincidences fueled by national pride and unverified anecdotes? Whatever your stance, this theory certainly underscores the archipelago's unique place in the web of ancient maritime exchange, inviting us to reconsider conventional assumptions about biblical geography. Despite the intriguing possibilities, mainstream scholarship generally places Tarshish in the Western Mediterranean, often tying it to Tartessos in southern Spain. Archaeological finds in that region reveal evidence of Phoenician commerce and suggest robust trade in precious metals, perfectly aligning with the biblical depiction of Tarshish as a rich, far-off land. Critics of the Philippines as Tarshish hypothesis also point to the sheer distance and navigational challenges ancient mariners would have faced traveling from the Levant all the way to Southeast Asia. Even if Phoenician ships could sail long distances, skeptics argue there's no solid archaeological or textual proof that they reached the Philippine archipelago. Additionally, conflating Tarshish with Ophir raises further complications, as the Bible treats these locations distinctly, and some believe the conflation stems more from nationalistic enthusiasm than from verifiable history. Furthermore, while Spanish accounts do mention gold-rich islands, much of this documentation postdates biblical times by over a millennium, making direct connections to Old Testament events tenuous. Thus, although the Philippines' abundant gold, maritime culture, and island geography seem to resonate with some aspects of the biblical Tarshish story, scholars caution that coincidences and broad interpretations can lead to conclusions that lack empirical support. When weighing the evidence for or against the Philippines as Tarshish, researchers often look first to archaeological and linguistic clues. Thus far, no conclusive artifacts link the ancient Israelites or Phoenicians directly to the Philippine archipelago, which makes the theory difficult to prove definitively. Some advocates point to possible linguistic overlaps in place, names, or loanwords, but such similarities can be coincidental, especially in a region as culturally diverse as Southeast Asia.